My name is Margaret Wright, and I am 32 years old. I never expected to feel such conflicting emotions when I saw them walk into my success party. My mother, Diana, my sister, Stephanie, and Jacob, my ex-boyfriend of 5 years. Their shocked expressions when they realized this was my event were nothing compared to their pale faces when they saw who stood beside me as my husband. The ultimate twist of fate that brought us full circle. If you are watching this from somewhere familiar with family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to rebuild your life after those closest to you broke your trust. Let me take you back to where it all began. Jacob and I met during our sophomore year at college. We were both studying business, though I was focusing on marketing while he pursued finance. Our connection was immediate. After bumping into each other at the campus coffee shop 3 times in 1 week, Jacob finally gathered the courage to ask for my number. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant just off campus. I still remember how he nervously spilled water on himself when trying to pour me a glass. That endearing awkwardness made me fall for him even faster. For 5 years, Jacob was my rock. We graduated together, found our first real jobs, and moved into our first apartment. He was kind, ambitious, and supportive, or so I thought. We talked about marriage, kids, and our dream home with the white picket fence and large backyard for our future golden retriever. I truly believed we were soulmates, destined to build a beautiful life together. My family situation was significantly less perfect. My mother, Diana, was a domineering woman who always had very specific ideas about how her daughters should live. From an early age, it was clear that my younger sister Stephanie was the favorite. While I was sensitive and artistic, Stephanie was outgoing and confident, traits my mother valued far more. Diana constantly compared us, making comments like, "Why cannot you be more like your sister?" or "Stephanie would have handled that situation better." Despite working hard throughout school and college, maintaining a 4, 0 GPA, and landing a good job after graduation, I never felt good enough in my mother's eyes. Every achievement of mine was minimized, while Stephanie's smallest accomplishments were celebrated extensively. This dynamic created an unspoken competition between us, though I tried my best to maintain a loving relationship with my sister. Stephanie was 5 years younger than me, just 22, when everything fell apart. She had always looked up to me in some ways, but there was also this underlying current of jealousy. Whenever I brought Jacob home, I noticed how she would find excuses to touch his arm while talking, or how she would mention interests that aligned perfectly with his. At the time, I dismissed these behaviors as innocent, perhaps even subconscious. I trusted both my sister and my boyfriend implicitly. As our 5th anniversary approached, I accidentally discovered Jacob had purchased an engagement ring. I found the receipt while looking for a takeout menu in his desk drawer. My heart soared with happiness. Finally, after 5 years together, we would be taking the next step. I kept this discovery to myself, wanting to act surprised when he actually proposed. I imagined it would happen during our anniversary dinner at the fancy restaurant he had mysteriously made reservations for. In the weeks leading up to our anniversary, I began noticing subtle changes in Jacob's behavior. He seemed distracted, often checking his phone with a slight smile that would disappear when I entered the room. He started working late more frequently and was vague about his whereabouts on weekends. When I asked about these changes, he would dismiss my concerns, saying work was stressful or that I was being paranoid. Even more strange was my mother's sudden interest in our relationship. She began inviting Jacob over for family dinners without me claiming she wanted to get to know her future son-in-law better. At the time, I was touched by her apparent acceptance of our relationship after years of suggesting I could do better or that I was settling down too young. One particular Sunday, about 2 weeks before our anniversary, my mother invited Jacob over while I was scheduled to work an emergency weekend shift. When I called to check in during my lunch break, Stephanie answered instead of Jacob. She mentioned casually that they were all having such a good time that Jacob might stay for dinner too. Something in her tone sent a chill down my spine, but I pushed the feeling away. These were the people I loved most in the world. Surely my uneasiness was unfounded. Looking back, all the signs were there, floating just beneath the surface of my perfect life. But love and trust can be powerful blinders. I was so convinced of my happy ending that I failed to see the betrayal brewing right under my nose, orchestrated by my own mother and carried out by the 2 people I never thought would hurt me. The day I discovered the truth started like any other Tuesday. I had left work early to prepare a special dinner for Jacob, wanting to practice a new recipe before our anniversary the following weekend. I stopped by my mother's house to borrow a specific baking dish she had promised to lend me. When I pulled into the driveway, I was surprised to see Jacob's car parked there. He had told me he would be working late that evening. Confused, but not yet suspicious, I used my key to enter through the side door that led directly into the kitchen. I heard voices coming from the living room and was about to announce my presence when I caught the serious tone of the conversation. Something made me pause and listen. "Jacob, I am only telling you this because I care about your future," my mother was saying, her voice carrying that persuasive tone I knew all too well. "Margaret is sweet, but let us be honest. Stephanie is stronger and better for you. She has always been the more resilient one, the one with true ambition." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. My own mother was trying to convince my boyfriend to leave me for my sister. This had to be some kind of terrible joke. But as I stood frozen in the hallway, the conversation continued, shattering any hope that I had misunderstood. "You know how sensitive Margaret is?" my mother continued. "She falls apart at the slightest criticism. Is that really the kind of partner you want standing beside you as you build your career? Someone who needs constant reassurance? Stephanie has that inner strength you need. She will push you to be better, not hold you back with her insecurities." I waited for Jacob to defend me, to tell my mother that she was wrong, that he loved me for exactly who I was. Instead, his response sent ice through my veins. "I know what you mean," Diana Jacob said with a sigh that suggested this was not their first such conversation. "Being with Margaret sometimes feels like walking on eggshells. I do care about her deeply, but lately I have been wondering if we are truly right for each other long term." "You are too kind to say it outright," my mother replied, "but I can tell you have feelings for Stephanie. I have seen how you look at her, how you two connect on a deeper level. Margaret is my daughter, and I love her, but I also want what is best for everyone. Sometimes the kindest thing is honesty, even when it hurts." Just when I thought it could not get worse, I heard Stephanie's voice join the conversation. "Jacob, we did not plan for this to happen, but you cannot deny there is something between us. Every time we talk, I feel like you understand me in a way no one else ever has." Peering around the corner, I saw Jacob reach out and take Stephanie's hand. The intimate gesture was like a knife to my heart. How long has this been going on? I wondered. Silently, tears beginning to stream down my face. "What about the ring?" Jacob asked, his voice lowered. "I already bought it." My mother laughed softly. "Well, fortunately, rings can be resized, and I think it would look perfect on Stephanie's finger. Do not you?" They were talking about the engagement ring meant for me, the ring I had been dreaming about since finding the receipt, the physical evidence of Jacob's love and commitment that was now apparently being redirected to my sister. In that moment, I felt my entire world crumbling around me. I must have made a sound, a gasp or sob that I could not contain because suddenly all three heads turned toward the hallway. Their expressions when they saw me standing there, tears streaming down my face, shifted from shock to guilt. But not enough guilt, not nearly enough. Margaret Jacob began dropping my sister's hand immediately. This is not what it looks like, but it was exactly what it looked like. My mother did not even have the decency to appear embarrassed at being caught. Stephanie at least had the grace to look somewhat ashamed, though she quickly composed herself, lifting her chin in that defiant way she had whenever she took something that belonged to me. I could not bear to hear their excuses or explanations. Without saying a word, I turned and ran out of the house, ignoring their calls for me to come back. I drove aimlessly for hours, tears blurring my vision before finally returning to the apartment Jacob and I shared. I packed an overnight bag, wrote a brief note saying I knew everything, and went to stay with my best friend Amy. That night, lying on Amy's pull-out couch, I cried until there were no tears left. The betrayal cut so deep that it felt physical, like my heart had been literally torn from my chest. The three people I trusted most in the world had conspired behind my back, plotting to replace me, as if I were an inadequate appliance rather than a person with feelings. My mother's words kept echoing in my mind. "Stephanie is stronger and better for you." After years of never measuring up in her eyes, this final betrayal somehow still had the power to shock me with its cruelty. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts and calls from Jacob, but I could not bring myself to answer. What could he possibly say that would make this situation okay? I turned my phone off and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow I would have to face them all and decide what to do with the shattered remains of my life. After a restless night on Amy's couch, I woke up feeling hollow but determined. I knew I needed answers, needed to hear them admit what they had done to my face. I turned my phone back on to find 23 missed calls and dozens of text messages from Jacob, my mother, and even Stephanie. Most of Jacob's texts followed the predictable pattern of denial. It is not what you think. Please let me explain. We need to talk. My mother's messages were more direct, suggesting I was overreacting and needed to think rationally about what is best for everyone. Stephanie had sent only one text. I am sorry you found out this way, but you need to accept that some things are just meant to be. I took a deep breath and texted Jacob that I would meet them at my mother's house at noon. I wanted all three of them there together. No more secrets. No more behind-my-back conversations. Amy offered to come with me for support, but this was something I needed to do alone. The drive to my childhood home felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. When I arrived, all three cars were already in the driveway. They were waiting for me in the living room, the same room where I had overheard their betrayal just yesterday. The irony was not lost on me. Margaret, my mother, started as soon as I walked in, her tone, authoritative as always. I hope you have calmed down enough to discuss this rationally. Rationally, I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. You want to discuss betrayal rationally? Jacob stepped forward, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Margaret, I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe that. But you did hurt me, I said, looking directly into his eyes. All of you did. I want to know how long this has been going on. There was an uncomfortable silence before Stephanie spoke up. We did not plan this, Margaret. It just happened. Jacob and I started talking more when he would come over for family dinners, and we realized we had a connection. A connection, I echoed flatly. And when exactly did this connection begin? Before or after he bought an engagement ring for me? Jacob had the decency to look ashamed. The ring. I bought it because I thought it was the next logical step for us. But then I started having doubts. Doubts that Mom helpfully nurtured? I asked, turning to my mother. Diana straightened her shoulders, utterly unrepentant. I simply pointed out what was already becoming obvious to everyone except you. Jacob and Stephanie are better suited for each other. You are too sensitive, too emotional for a man with Jacob's ambitions. I did what any mother would do. I looked out for the best interests of my children. Both your children? I asked incredulously. Or just your favorite? Do not be dramatic, Margaret, my mother dismissed with a wave of her hand. This is exactly the kind of emotional overreaction that proves my point. Stephanie would never fall apart like this. I turned to Stephanie, who at least had the grace to look somewhat uncomfortable. And you, my own sister, you had no problem betraying me. Stephanie sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. Look, I am sorry you are hurt, but Jacob and I cannot help how we feel. You will get over this and probably find someone better suited to you. Better suited. I repeated the phrase, bitter on my tongue. You know, it is fascinating how you have all convinced yourselves that this betrayal is actually a favor to me. I turned back to Jacob, the man I had planned to spend my life with. And you, do you have anything to say for yourself? Jacob ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing, but now seemed like calculated dishevelment. Margaret, I do care about you. I always will. But your mother is right. Stephanie and I, we connect on a different level. She understands my ambitions, my goals. Because I was only supportive of your dreams for 5 years, I said sarcastically. Clearly, that was not enough. It is different with Stephanie, he insisted. She challenges me in ways you never did. Well, congratulations to you both, I said, my voice finally breaking. I hope you will be very happy together. My mother stepped forward, her tone softening in that manipulative way she had when she wanted to appear reasonable. Margaret, darling, I know this is difficult now, but one day you will thank me. Jacob was never right for you. Too ambitious, too driven. You need someone gentler, more patient. The audacity of her statement, after everything she had said about me not being strong enough for Jacob, was breathtaking. But in that moment, I realized something profound. This woman would never see me clearly. She would always twist the narrative to justify her actions, to make herself the hero of a story where she was clearly the villain. I am leaving, I announced, my decision crystallizing in that moment. Not just this house, but this town. I am cutting all ties with all of you. Do not be ridiculous, my mother scoffed. Where will you go? What will you do? That is no longer any of your concern, I replied, feeling a strange calm settle over me. None of you get to have opinions about my life anymore. Jacob looked genuinely alarmed. Margaret, you do not have to leave. I can move out of the apartment. We can figure this out like adults. Like adults. I laughed without humor. Nothing about what you three did was adult. It was selfish, deceitful, and cruel, and I deserve better than all of you. With those words, I walked out, ignoring their calls for me to come back and be reasonable. I drove straight to our apartment, relieved to find it empty. Jacob must have stayed at my mother's last night. I packed as much as I could fit into my car, called my landlord to explain I would be breaking our lease, and left a formal note for Jacob detailing how we would divide our shared possessions. I was not taking anything that we had bought together except personal items. He could have the furniture, the appliances, all of it. I wanted nothing that would remind me of the life we had shared. As I loaded the last box into my car, rain began to fall, matching my mood perfectly. I had no clear destination in mind, just the desperate need to get away from the three people who had betrayed me so completely. I called Amy from the road, telling her my plans, or lack thereof. Come stay with me for as long as you need, she offered immediately. You can job hunt from here and figure out your next steps. I accepted gratefully, knowing I needed a friend now more than ever. As I drove through the pouring rain toward Amy's apartment in a city 3 hours away, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and liberation. Everything I had believed about my life had been a lie. But now I had the chance to build something real, something that belonged entirely to me. Without Jacob, without my mother's constant criticism, without Stephanie's shadow, for the first time in my life, I was completely on my own. And despite the pain, there was freedom in that realization. The first few months at Amy's apartment were a blur of grief and adjustment. I slept on her pull-out couch, applied for jobs during the day, and cried myself to sleep most nights. Amy was patient and supportive, never pushing me to get over it or move on before I was ready. She understood that what I had experienced was not just a breakup, but a complete betrayal of trust from the three people who should have loved me most. Eventually, I found a junior marketing position at a small tech startup in the city. The pay was modest, barely enough to afford a tiny studio apartment, but it was a start. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office and volunteering for every project possible. My boss, Carolyn, noticed my dedication and began giving me more responsibility. The company was developing an innovative customer relationship management software, and I found myself genuinely excited about marketing a product I believed in. Financially, those early days were challenging. I had left behind most of my possessions and had to start from scratch. My apartment was sparsely furnished with thrift store finds and items from discount stores. I counted every penny, made coffee at home instead of stopping at cafes, and learned to cook simple meals instead of ordering takeout. But there was pride in this struggle, in knowing I was building something that was entirely mine. The emotional healing was slower and more painful. Jacob tried to contact me several times in those first few months, but I maintained my resolve to cut all ties. I blocked his number, deleted my social media accounts, and created new ones under a slightly different name to make it harder for him or my family to find me. Amy was my conduit to our old friend group, filtering information so I would not be blindsided by updates about Jacob and Stephanie's relationship. 6 months into my new life, I was invited to represent our company at a regional tech conference. It was my first major professional opportunity, and I was determined to make the most of it. I spent hours preparing our booth, rehearsing my product pitch, and creating engaging marketing materials on a shoestring budget. On the second day of the conference, a tall, well-dressed man stopped by our booth. He asked insightful questions about our software, seeming genuinely interested in both the technology and our marketing approach. He introduced himself as Alexander Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, a successful venture capital firm specializing in tech investments. Your pitch was impressive, he told me after I had finished my presentation. You managed to explain complex features in a way that highlights their actual benefits to users. That is rare. His compliment made me blush. Alexander was not only successful and intelligent, but also undeniably handsome, with dark hair, starting to gray at the temples and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. But after Jacob, I had built walls around my heart that seemed impenetrable. Thank you, I replied professionally. We believe our product fills a real need in the market. I agree, he said, handing me his business card. I would like to continue this conversation, perhaps over dinner. I hesitated immediately, interpreting his invitation as professional networking rather than personal interest. I appreciate the offer, but I am not authorized to discuss potential investments. Our CEO would be better suited for that conversation. Alexander smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Actually, I was asking you to dinner because I enjoyed talking with you, not to discuss business, but I understand your caution. I felt my cheeks heat up again, embarrassed by my assumption. I am sorry, No need to apologize, he assured me. The invitation stands business or personal, whichever you are comfortable with. Something about his respectful approach and the genuine warmth in his eyes made me take a chance. Dinner would be nice, I said, surprising myself. That dinner turned out to be the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Alexander was unlike anyone I had ever met. He was successful, yes, but wore his success lightly. He was interested in my opinions, asked thoughtful questions, and actually listened to my answers. When I told him I worked in marketing for a small startup, he did not dismiss it as unimportant compared to his own career. Instead, he asked about our strategies, our challenges, and seemed genuinely impressed by the creative solutions I had implemented with limited resources. As our dinner came to an end, Alexander asked if he could see me again. Despite my lingering fears of being hurt, I found myself saying yes. There was something about him that felt safe, trustworthy, in a way I desperately needed. Over the following weeks, Alexander and I began seeing each other regularly, despite living in cities an hour apart. He would drive to see me after work, or I would take the train to meet him for weekend outings. He showed me a side of the city I had never experienced on my limited budget, but was equally happy with simple pleasures like walks in the park or cooking dinner together at my tiny apartment. 3 months into our relationship, Alexander made a business proposal that would change everything. His company wanted to invest in the startup where I worked. The investment would allow us to expand our team, improve our product, and scale our marketing efforts. I was careful to recuse myself from any discussions about the deal, not wanting our personal relationship to create a conflict of interest. But when the investment went through, Carolyn offered me the position of marketing director, complete with a substantial raise. You have earned this, she assured me when I expressed concern about the timing. Alexander made it clear that his investment was based on the quality of our product and team, not on his relationship with you. In fact, he specifically requested that any decisions about your role be made independently by existing management. With my new salary, I was able to move into a better apartment and finally start building a more stable life. Alexander was supportive, but never intrusive, understanding my need for independence after everything I had been through. When I finally told him about Jacob, my mother, and Stephanie, he listened without judgment, holding me as I cried through the parts that still hurt to remember. They were wrong about you, he said simply when I finished my story. Anyone who could walk away from that situation and build a new life from nothing is incredibly strong. You should be proud of yourself, Margaret. His words were a balm to wounds that had never fully healed. For so long, I had internalized my mother's assessment of me as weak, too sensitive, not good enough. Hearing Alexander, a man I respected deeply, directly contradict those beliefs helped me begin to see myself differently. As our relationship deepened, I struggled with trust issues that would occasionally surface in moments of insecurity. Sometimes when Alexander would cancel plans due to work, a small voice in my head would whisper doubts. Was he really working late, or was history repeating itself? But each time Alexander proved himself trustworthy, calling when he said he would, showing up consistently, and never giving me reason to doubt his feelings. A year into our relationship, I was thriving both personally and professionally. Our company had grown significantly with Alexander's investment, and my marketing campaigns were a key factor in our success. Alexander and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm, spending most weekends together while maintaining our independent lives during the week. I had made new friends, joined a yoga studio, and even started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago due to my mother's dismissive comments about my impractical interests. When Alexander suggested we take a weekend trip to a small coastal town to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, I happily agreed. The quaint bed and breakfast he chose overlooked the ocean, and we spent our first day walking along the beach, exploring local shops, and enjoying fresh seafood at a restaurant right on the water. On our second evening, Alexander suggested a sunset walk along the cliffs. As we reached a particularly beautiful viewpoint, he turned to me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of nervousness and determination. "Margaret," he began, taking both my hands in his, "this past year has been the happiest of my life. You came into my world unexpectedly and changed everything for the better." My heart began to race as he dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a stunning emerald ring surrounded by small diamonds. "I chose emerald because it reminds me of your eyes," he explained, "but also because emeralds symbolize growth and new beginnings, which is exactly what you have brought into my life. Margaret Wright, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes as I looked down at this wonderful man, so different from Jacob in all the ways that mattered. Alexander had never made me feel that I needed to be someone else to be worthy of his love. He valued my sensitivity, my creativity, my determination. He saw me clearly and loved what he saw. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes, absolutely, yes." As he slipped the ring onto my finger and rose to kiss me, I felt the last pieces of my broken heart finally mend together, stronger at the seams where they had been shattered. Alexander and I decided on a small, intimate wedding 6 months after his proposal. Unlike the elaborate event I had once imagined with Jacob, our ceremony was simple but elegant, held in the garden of a historic inn with only 50 guests in attendance. My side was noticeably smaller, consisting primarily of my new friends and colleagues. I had not invited my mother or Stephanie, nor had I maintained contact with any extended family who might inform them of my wedding. Amy served as my maid of honor, her presence a beautiful reminder of the friendship that had sustained me through my darkest days. As she helped me into my wedding dress, a sleek, modern design that felt nothing like the princess gown I had once described to Jacob, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the path that had led me here, painful though it had been. "Are you nervous?" Amy asked as she adjusted my veil. "Surprisingly, no," I replied truthfully. With Jacob, I always had this underlying anxiety, like I needed to be perfect, or he might change his mind. With Alexander, I just feel peaceful, like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Amy smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "You deserve this happiness, Margaret, more than anyone I know." The ceremony was everything I had hoped for, intimate and meaningful. When Alexander recited his vows, promising to cherish and respect me, to be my partner in all things, I knew with absolute certainty that he meant every word. As we exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, I felt none of the insecurity that had plagued my relationship with Jacob. This love was built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine acceptance. Our honeymoon was a 2-week trip to Italy, exploring Venice, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast. Alexander had suggested we disconnect completely, leaving our phones and laptops behind except for emergency contact information. Those 2 weeks of uninterrupted time together deepened our bond even further as we navigated foreign cities, tried new foods, and created memories that belonged only to us. Upon our return, we moved into a beautiful brownstone that Alexander had purchased as a wedding gift for us. It was in an upscale neighborhood of the city, close enough to both our offices for convenient commutes, but with the space and character we both loved. For the first time, I had a dedicated room for my painting with large windows that flooded the space with natural light. Alexander had it professionally outfitted with high-quality supplies, encouraging me to pursue my art seriously. Professionally, I continued to thrive. Our startup had grown exponentially, and my role had expanded accordingly. I now led a team of 10 marketing professionals with a substantial budget and creative freedom. The CRM software we had developed was being adopted by major corporations, and I frequently represented the company at industry conferences and events. What I had not known when I first met Alexander was the true extent of his success. Reed Enterprises was not just a venture capital firm, but one of the most respected in the industry, with investments in dozens of successful tech companies. Alexander himself was considered something of a legend in business circles, known for his uncanny ability to identify promising startups and his ethical approach to investment. This realization came gradually as I attended business events with him and witnessed the respect he commanded. Yet Alexander never flaunted his wealth or status. He lived comfortably, but not ostentatiously, drove a luxury car, but kept it for years rather than upgrading for show, and preferred quiet dinners at neighborhood restaurants to flashy celebrity haunts. 2 years into our marriage, we had settled into a life that exceeded any dreams I might have had before. We both worked hard during the week, but preserved our weekends for each other. We traveled frequently, both for business and pleasure, often combining the two. Alexander had introduced me to skiing, a sport I had never tried before, and I had surprised myself by loving the exhilaration of racing down mountain slopes. It was during a rare, quiet Sunday at home, as I browsed social media while Alexander read the newspaper, that I stumbled across a post from a college friend who had remained in my hometown. It was a congratulatory message to Jacob and Stephanie on their wedding. The post included a photo of them standing outside a local church, my mother beaming beside them in a lavish mother of the bride outfit. I felt a strange hollowness as I studied the image. Stephanie wore a princess-style gown, remarkably similar to the one I had once described wanting. Jacob looked older somehow, his boyish charm replaced by a more serious expression. My mother appeared triumphant, as though this union was her crowning achievement. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked, noticing my extended silence. I turned my tablet toward him, showing him the image. They got married. Alexander set down his newspaper and moved to sit beside me on the couch, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "How do you feel about that?" I considered his question carefully. Honestly, nothing like what I would have expected a few years ago. Not anger or jealousy or even hurt, really. Just a kind of sad detachment, like I am looking at strangers in a story that has nothing to do with me anymore. He nodded, understanding as always. "That makes sense. They were once central characters in your life story, but now they are just people you used to know." "Exactly," I agreed, leaning into his embrace. "I do hope they are happy in a distant way, but their happiness or unhappiness does not affect mine anymore." I closed the browser and set the tablet aside, turning to kiss my husband. In that moment, I felt a final release from the past, a complete severing of the emotional ties that had once bound me to Jacob, Stephanie, and my mother. Their story would continue without me, just as mine had flourished without them. 3 years into our marriage, Alexander and I were discussing potential expansion locations for Reed Enterprises. The company had grown significantly under his leadership, and he was considering opening a new office to better serve clients in different regions. "What about your hometown?" he suggested one evening as we reviewed potential locations. "The data shows it has a growing tech sector, affordable commercial real estate, and a good talent pool from the nearby universities." I froze at his suggestion, my wine glass halfway to my lips. My hometown, where my mother and sister still live, where Jacob probably still works at First National Bank. Alexander reached for my hand. "I know it is complicated, but from a purely business perspective, it makes sense. And perhaps there would be something, I don't know, empowering about returning on your own terms. As the successful executive you have become, not the heartbroken woman who left." I considered his words carefully. 5 years had passed since I had fled my hometown with nothing but a car full of possessions and shattered dreams. In that time, I had not only rebuilt my life, but had created one more successful and fulfilling than I could have imagined. The wounds that had once felt so raw had scarred over, no longer painful to the touch, but still visible if you knew where to look. "I would never suggest this if I thought it would hurt you," Alexander continued, "but I wonder if facing your past might be the final step in your healing journey." "You might be right," I admitted after a long pause. "I have spent 5 years avoiding any connection to that place, to those people, but running away was a necessity then, not a choice I want to keep making forever." Over the following weeks, we discussed the possibility in depth. Alexander assured me that he would handle all the business aspects, that I would not need to be involved in setting up the new office if I did not want to be. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I did want to be involved. I wanted to return not as someone hiding in the shadows, but as the confident, successful woman I had become. 6 months later, our plans were in motion. Reed Enterprises had purchased a landmark building in the downtown area of my hometown, and renovation was underway to transform it into a modern office space. As part of our expansion strategy, Alexander had also acquired a controlling interest in Midwest Financial Group, the parent company of First National Bank, where Jacob worked. This was a purely business decision based on the bank's strong regional presence and potential for growth, but the irony was not lost on me. As the project progressed, I found myself taking an increasingly active role. I visited the construction site, met with local business leaders, and began planning the marketing strategy for our grand opening. Each trip back to my hometown became easier than the last, as I reclaimed spaces and memories on my own terms. During one such visit, I drove past my mother's house, the site of so much pain. It looked smaller, somehow less imposing than in my memories. I did not stop or drive by slowly, just noted its presence with a detached curiosity before continuing on my way. This small act felt significant, a measure of how far I had come. As the date for our official grand opening approached, Alexander and I decided to host a lavish reception for local business leaders, potential clients, and community figures. It would be a showcase not only of our new office, but of the Reed Enterprises philosophy and approach to business relationships. "You know they might be there," Alexander said gently as we reviewed the invitation list. "Jacob works for a bank we now partially own. Your mother is on the board of the community foundation we are partnering with for our local philanthropic initiatives. Stephanie runs that boutique marketing agency that handles several businesses in our network." "I know," I replied, surprising myself with my calmness, "and I am okay with that, really." As I said the words, I realized they were true. The thought of seeing them again no longer filled me with dread or anxiety. They had lost their power over me, reduced from looming figures of betrayal to simply people who had once been important in my life, but no longer were. The week of the reception arrived, bringing with it an unexpected email from Jacob. Seeing his name in my inbox sent a momentary jolt through me, but it was just surprise, not pain. "Dear Margaret," he wrote, "I recently learned that you are involved with Reed Enterprises' expansion into our community. I am now SVP of Commercial Lending at First National, and will likely be attending your reception this Friday. I wanted to reach out in advance to avoid any awkwardness. I hope we can interact professionally despite our history. Sincerely, Jacob." I showed the email to Alexander, who raised an eyebrow. "SVP of Commercial Lending? That is not what our acquisition team reported. He is a mid-level manager in their retail banking division." I could not help but laugh at Jacob's attempted self-aggrandizement. Some things never change. He always did care so much about status and titles. "How do you want to handle this?" Alexander asked. "I will not respond," I decided. "If he attends, I will be polite but brief. This is our event, our moment. I will not let the past intrude on it." The night of the reception arrived, and I felt a strange sense of déjà vu as I prepared in our hotel suite. 5 years ago, I had fled this town, heartbroken and uncertain of my future. Now I was returning as a successful executive, happily married to an amazing man who saw and valued me for exactly who I was. I chose my outfit carefully, a sleek midnight blue gown that was elegant without being flashy, paired with the emerald and diamond earrings Alexander had given me for our 3rd anniversary to match my engagement ring. As I applied my makeup and styled my hair, I studied my reflection, noting the confidence in my eyes that had been absent when I lived here before. Alexander wrapped his arms around me from behind, meeting my gaze in the mirror. "You look absolutely stunning, ready to show this town what they missed out on?" I turned in his embrace to kiss him. More than ready, but not to prove anything to them, just to celebrate how far we have come. As our driver pulled up to the renovated historic building that now housed Reed Enterprises' newest office, I felt a surge of pride. The facade was beautifully lit, highlighting the restored architectural details, while discreet signage announced the building's new purpose. Inside, the space had been transformed into an elegant venue for the evening, with catering stations, a small orchestra, and displays highlighting the company's history and vision. Alexander and I separated briefly as we arrived, he to check on some last-minute details with the event coordinator, and I to greet the mayor and several city council members who were among our earliest arrivals. I was deep in conversation about our community investment plans when I felt a familiar presence at the edge of my awareness. Turning slightly, I saw them. My mother, elegant as always in an expensive suit, her hair perfectly coiffed. Stephanie wearing a dress that seemed calculated to draw attention, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. And between them, Jacob, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered, his forced smile not quite reaching his eyes. They had not noticed me yet, still taking in the opulence of the event, the important people in attendance, the clear success of Reed Enterprises. I took a deep breath, excused myself from my current conversation, and prepared to face my past. I approached them with measured steps, my head held high, and a professional smile on my face. It was Stephanie who saw me first, her eyes widening in recognition before she nudged my mother. Jacob was the last to turn, and when he did, the shock on his face was almost comical. "Good evening," I greeted them calmly. "Welcome to Reed Enterprises. We are pleased you could attend our reception." My mother recovered first, her social mask sliding into place as she extended her hand. "Margaret, you look well. It has been a long time." 5 years, I confirmed briefly, taking her hand before releasing it. "I trust you have been well, Diana." The use of her first name rather than Mom was deliberate, and I saw the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated she had noticed. "Very well, thank you," she replied stiffly. "This is quite an event. I had no idea you were involved with Reed Enterprises." "I am the Chief Marketing Officer for our tech division," I explained, enjoying the surprise that flickered across her face. My mother had never believed I would achieve significant professional success. Stephanie stepped forward next, attempting to kiss my cheek, which I subtly avoided by extending my hand instead. "Margaret, what a surprise! You just disappeared without a word. We were all so worried." "Were you?" I asked, my tone pleasant but cool. "How thoughtful. Congratulations on your marriage, by the way. I happened to see a photo online." Jacob shuffled uncomfortably, finally extending his hand. "Margaret, you look amazing. I sent you an email." "Yes, I received it," I acknowledged, shaking his hand briefly. "Congratulations on your position at First National, though I believe it is Assistant Manager of Retail Banking, not SVP of Commercial Lending, correct?" His face flushed red at being caught in his exaggeration. "Well, I am up for promotion soon. The title change is practically a formality at this point." "I see," I replied, not bothering to correct his assumption that I had any interest in his career trajectory. An uncomfortable silence fell between us, broken when my mother cleared her throat. "So, Margaret, are you just handling the marketing for this event, or—" The implication that I was merely a contractor rather than an executive was so typical of her that I almost laughed. "Actually, Diana, Reed Enterprises is my husband's company. Alexander and I decided together to expand into this market." All three of them looked stunned at this revelation. Before they could respond, I continued. "Speaking of my husband, I should introduce you. He will be giving a welcome speech shortly." I gestured toward Alexander, who had been observing our interaction from a distance, and now made his way over. As he approached, I could see the three of them taking in his confident bearing, his bespoke suit, the natural authority he projected without effort. "Alexander, darling, I would like to introduce you to Diana Wright, my mother, Stephanie Campbell, my sister, and Jacob Campbell, her husband. Everyone, this is Alexander Reed, my husband and the founder and CEO of Reed Enterprises." Alexander extended his hand to each of them in turn, his manner perfectly cordial but with an underlying coolness that told me he had not forgotten what they had done to me. "A pleasure to meet you all. I have heard quite a bit about you." My mother's expression shifted rapidly from shock to calculation as she sized up Alexander, clearly recognizing both his wealth and his influence. "Mr. Reed, what a wonderful event. Your company's investment in our community is most welcome." "Thank you," Alexander replied politely. "We see great potential here. In fact, we have already made several strategic investments in local businesses, including acquiring a controlling interest in Midwest Financial Group." Jacob paled visibly at this information. "Midwest Financial. That is First National's parent company." "Indeed," Alexander confirmed, his tone pleasant but his eyes sharp. "We are looking forward to working closely with all divisions of the bank to optimize operations. I believe there will be some restructuring in the coming months." The implication hung in the air, and I watched Jacob swallow hard as he realized his professional future now rested partly in the hands of the husband of the woman he had betrayed. Stephanie, always quick to shift allegiances to whoever held the most power, turned her most charming smile on Alexander. "Well, we are just thrilled for Margaret's success. She always was the ambitious one in the family." "Interesting," Alexander mused, his arm sliding around my waist supportively. "That is not consistent with what Margaret has shared about her upbringing. But perspectives can certainly differ within families." My mother, sensing the conversation was not going in a favorable direction, attempted to redirect. "Margaret always underestimated herself. I always knew she would do well eventually, with the right guidance." "The right guidance," I repeated, unable to keep a hint of irony from my voice. Yes, leaving everything behind and starting over from nothing was quite instructive. Before the conversation could grow more uncomfortable, one of our event coordinators approached to inform Alexander that it was time for his welcome speech. He excused himself with perfect courtesy, kissing me briefly before heading toward the small stage at the front of the room. Left alone again with my former family, I decided to be direct. I did not invite you here to embarrass you or to flaunt my success. In fact, I did not specifically invite you at all. You were included in the general invitations to local business leaders. But since we have this opportunity, I want to be clear about something. I have moved on completely from what happened 5 years ago. I have built a life I love with a man who respects and values me exactly as I am. My mother started to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. I do not need or want apologies or explanations. What you did showed me who you truly are, and that knowledge freed me to become who I was meant to be. For that, in a strange way, I should thank you. Jacob looked down at his shoes, unable to meet my gaze. Margaret, I just want you to know things have not been easy. The bank has been struggling, and Stephanie and I, well, marriage is more complicated than we expected. I am sorry to hear that, I replied, and I was surprised to realize I meant it, not because I wished them ill, but because I genuinely had no desire to see them unhappy, even after what they had done. I hope you find your way to whatever is best for both of you. Stephanie's facade of charm cracked slightly. It is easy for you to be so magnanimous now that you have all this. She gestured around at the elegant reception. You always did land on your feet. I considered her words, remembering the months of tears, the financial struggles, the slow, painful process of rebuilding my self-worth. No, Stephanie, I did not land on my feet. I picked myself up, step by step, day by day. The difference matters. My mother, never one to accept being sidelined in a conversation, interjected, Well, we should mingle with the other guests. Lovely to see you doing so well, Margaret. Perhaps we could have lunch sometime while you are in town. Her suggestion was so disconnected from reality, so dismissive of the depth of her betrayal, that I could only shake my head in wonder. I do not think so, Diana. My schedule is quite full, and, to be honest, I do not see any benefit in renewing our relationship. I wish you well, but from a distance. With those words, I excused myself to join Alexander at the front of the room. As I walked away, I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a profound sense of closure. The three people who had once defined my world through their betrayal now seemed small and inconsequential compared to the life I had built. Alexander's speech was inspiring and warmly received, outlining Reed Enterprises' vision for community investment and growth. As he introduced me as both his wife and a key executive in the company, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with impressing my former family and everything to do with what we had built together. Later that evening, as the reception wound down and the last guest departed, Alexander and I stood together in the beautiful space that represented our shared success. How do you feel? He asked, his arms encircling me from behind as we looked out over the twinkling lights of the town I had once fled in heartbreak. Complete, I answered honestly. Seeing them again made me realize how truly healed I am. They have no power over me anymore, no ability to hurt me. All I feel is gratitude for the path that led me to you. Alexander turned me in his arms, his eyes serious as he studied my face. You know, when they saw me, they did not just see your successful husband. They saw the man who loves and values everything about you that they were too blind to appreciate, your sensitivity, your creativity, your incredible strength. Their loss was immeasurable and entirely their fault. Tears pricked at my eyes as I reached up to touch his face. How did I get so lucky? He smiled, that special smile that was only for me. It was not luck, Margaret. It was courage. The courage to leave a situation that was hurting you, to build something new, to risk loving again. You are the architect of this life we share. Never forget that. As we left the building and stepped into the warm summer night, I took one last look at the town that had once been the setting for my greatest heartbreak. It held no power over me now, no painful memories that could overshadow my present happiness. In losing what I thought I wanted, I had found what I truly needed, a love based on mutual respect, admiration, and acceptance. Sometimes the people who push you away from the life you thought you wanted are unknowingly guiding you toward the life you were meant to have all along. That night, as Alexander and I returned to our hotel, I felt nothing but gratitude for the painful journey that had led me to this moment of complete contentment and true love. If you have ever experienced betrayal from those closest to you, remember that it does not define your worth or your future. Your story is not over because one chapter ended badly. Share your own experiences of rising above betrayal in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from scratch? What gave you the strength to keep going? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their best life may still be waiting for them just beyond their current pain. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come disguised as painful endings.